Muy buenos días.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we're going to get started. We're going to get started with the event about the 5 Great Forests of Mesoamerica. So this is a regional initiative for biodiversity. My name is Jeremy Radachowski. I'm the regional director for the WCS in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today. So during this event, we're going to talk about how, as part of a multi-sectoral alliance, we can save the 5 biggest forests of Mesoamerica, and how we can also be an example for the world, how we can also protect the climate, biodiversity, and people. This event will be organized in 2 parts. First of all, we will have a presentation and a short video about the initiative, and then we will have a panel. We'll have a number of ministers, vice ministers, representatives of indigenous peoples across Mesoamerica. So, without further ado, let's get started, and I'll give the floor to Felice Zaccheo for an introduction. He's the head of unit for DG INTPA at the European Commission. Felice, you have the floor. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. Dear participants, dear audience, I'm only with you virtually because unfortunately my trip to Glasgow wasn't able to happen. But it's really an honor to be here with you and to open this panel. I would like to give my greetings to the Minister of the Environment of Nicaragua, Mr. Mario Rojas Espino. There's also the Costa Rica Minister, the Minister from Panama, the Honorable Militares Concepcion. We've also got a representative from the Mesoamerican Alliance of Peoples and Forests, Levi Sucre. We've also got the regional director of the Wildlife Conservation Society, Chris Jordan from Rewild, and Jair Uriola from the Central American Commission for the Environment and Development, and any other panelists who are there. I hope to be able to see most of you at the end of the month. It'll be wonderful to see you in person when I go to the region, and I hope I'll be able to see most of you then. So first of all, I would like to highlight that the European Union is incredibly strongly committed to fighting climate change. We're in a historic moment. It's a time when we can't wait anymore. We have to take action right away. With the European Green Deal, we are setting a positive example of this, and we're encouraging the rest of the world to cut their emissions. They're also all establishing their own dates for climate action. But we can't take action alone. Climate change and the effects of climate change will only be combated by working together on an international level. It's a great honor for the European Union to be part of this forum and this alliance to protect the 5 great forests of the world, of Mesoamerica. This is a home to great biodiversity and many species. Forests are absolutely vital to mitigate climate change. They absorb up to 30% of greenhouse gas emissions. They are just as important for climate change adaptation. However, we're seeing a level of destruction which is absolutely alarming. The initiative of the 5 Great Forests of Mesoamerica is an example of what can be done to create a new development model which puts people and the planet at the heart of their action. This is a model which recognizes and actively involves indigenous communities. It also provides full acknowledgement for their rights. This is a model which acknowledges the link between the loss of biodiversity, climate change, and human well-being. We trust this initiative as well as the partners involved in this initiative, you. For this reason, in July last year, we signed an agreement with a number of organizations and pledged several million euros for the forests of Mesoamerica. So we will work to preserve, restore, and ensure the survival of these forests. We are basing ourselves on nature, and we will eliminate illegal livestock. The EU's cooperation will continue, and we will promote the correct use of forests based on good governance, sustainability, biodiversity, and the well-being of local people. We are also working on adopting a legislative proposal to ensure that products imported to the EU don't contribute to deforestation. This type of initiative, dear panelists and dear public, are at the heart of our green action. The European Union and its member states will continue looking for opportunities to support the region and to preserve the 5 main forests of Mesoamerica. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias por...
Thank you very much for your words, Felice. We are incredibly grateful for the support of the European Union. You are very welcome to visit the 5 main forests of Mesoamerica whenever you want. And you can see that everyone shares the same idea. Thank you very much, Mr. Felice Saccheo. So, we're going to continue with a short video. This is about the initiative of the 5 main forests in Mesoamerica.
From Mexico to Colombia, from the Pacific to the Caribbean, and at 120,000 kilometers squared, covering three times the size of Switzerland, are Mesoamerica's 5 great forests. These five forests encapsulate the essence of Mesoamerica. Together, they shelter incredible biodiversity, with over 2,000 known vertebrate species, many that are rare and endangered, including jaguar, Baird's tapir, harpy eagle, and the Central American river turtle. They provide irreplaceable flyway and wintering grounds for migratory birds. Ancient culture is embedded within the heart of these forests, with vestiges of ancient civilization across several World Heritage Sites. More than 5 million people depend on the 5 forests, more than half of which are within indigenous territories with a diversity of cultures and languages. The 5 forests are also of global significance, as they keep approximately half of Mesoamerica's carbon stores locked away. But we are losing these incredible forests. Since the year 2000, 3 of Central America's 5 great forests have been reduced in size by more than 23%. This decline has been driven by an insatiable global demand for beef, as 90% of deforestation in the 5 forests is inflicted by illegal cattle ranching. To stave off the worst effects of climate change, are vanishing with every hectare of the 5 forests that is converted to pasture. The very identity of Mesoamerica is at stake, but it is not too late. Together, we can still protect what makes Mesoamerica unique, awe-inspiring and wild. Governments, citizens, companies, and local indigenous and Afro-descendant peoples are joining forces to turn the tide for Mesoamerica's 5 forests. We are providing economic alternatives that result in more trees, fewer cows, and are compatible with local and indigenous cultures. We are supporting local people to fight for their rights to manage natural resources and protect their forests. We are ensuring we safeguard the region's most at-risk species. Through protecting the 5 forests, Mesoamerican countries can meet their international climate commitments. Without the 5 forests, they cannot. By 2030, we aim to ensure that over the 5 forests there is 0 extinctions of species, 10 million hectares of land protected, 500,000 hectares of forest recovered, and 0 illegal cattle ranching. Mesoamerica's people, their culture, biodiversity, resilience to climate change, economic health, the very essence of Mesoamerica, all depend on this land. Join us and help conserve the 5 forests of Mesoamerica.
Muchas gracias nuevamente.
Thank you once again. So we're going to now have a short presentation. But first of all, I want to thank once again the European Union for their support and contributions for the 5 great forests of Mesoamerica. I would also like to thank all the ministers, officials, activists and participants here at EUROCLIMA. Thank you very much to EUROCLIMA for giving us this venue. I'm going to give a presentation a little bit slightly more subjective about the 5 great forests. Mesoamerica is a magical place. In Mesoamerica, we still have the 5 great forests, the Maya jungle mosquitia, Indio maíz tortuguero, La Amistad, and Darien. They're all cross borders. We're talking about 127,000 square kilometers, 3 times the size of Switzerland. We still have a number of important species, emblematic species. They're among the only species in the world. We have ancient civilizations and vibrant cultures which live in the forests. More than half of the forests are inhabited by local communities. Half of the carbon in Central America is in these 5 forests. The forests are also incredibly important for resilience and adaptation in the face of climate change. They protect watersheds, water, they regulate the local climate, and they mitigate against natural disasters. However, the 5 forests are facing major challenges at the moment. In a period of 15 years, 3 of the forests have lost more than 23% of their total area. Even more worrying than that, 2 of them are risk being sliced in 2. The major part of this deforestation is because of illegal cattle ranching. 90% of recent deforestation is due to this. It's also linked to other aspects of organized crime, for example, drug trafficking in some of the less governed areas of the country. It's also linked to illegal livestock and land grabbing and getting hold of resources. Part of this livestock is being exported to international markets, and this is something which we need to put an end to. The Central American region is also very vulnerable to climate change. We have had long, dry seasons, very dry seasons indeed, and this has had impacts on the forests, for the fauna, and for the people of the area, especially in the area of food security and air quality. During the rainy season, we have seen hurricanes and tropical storms. These have been harsher and more frequent. There were 2 hurricanes last year, Category 5 hurricanes, which struck the region, and it affected over 7 million people and caused $2.6 billion of damage. More than ever, it's very clear that environmental security is needed for national security, regional security, and human well-being in the region. More than ever, we need to reactivate and transform our economy after COVID. We also need to manage countries after the COVID crisis. So, in the midst of this context, there's the initiative of the 5 Great Forests of Mesoamerica. This is an initiative which has 3 main principles. The first one is that it's a movement and not a project. The most important thing to remember is that it is a multi-sectoral alliance, and there's just one main vision and strategy. We're working together with governments, civil society, indigenous peoples, and the private sector. The second principle is we need to tackle the main threat, and that's livestock. We need to ensure that there are incentives in place to make sure that there are more trees and fewer cows. The third principle, we need to promote and bolster local and community leadership and look for local solutions. Indigenous groups, including the Mesoamerican Alliance of Peoples and Forests, need to be involved in decision-making in initiatives in the local area. And they also need to be able to reap the benefits in the region. It's also very important that we talk about biodiversity, mitigation of climate change, human development. These are all things that need to be discussed together, because they benefit all of us. We also need to harmonise policies. We need to harmonise environmental policies, agricultural policy. Mesoamerica is taking a number of steps in this direction for 2040. But there also need to be local and regional policies.
En términos de financiación,
now, when it comes to financing, we also have to finance conservation. It's very important to coordinate the financing stemming from multilateral sources along with bilateral sources, including, and this is very important, the investments of national governments and budgets, as well as cooperation with the private sector. It should also be pointed out that this initiative stems from a long and extensive process of consultation and consensus, which is ongoing to this day. We've had several conversations for the past few years in different fora, and we've also presented in international fora all about our initiative. So this has been a jointly developed process. And if you could go back to the previous slide, please. Go back one more. It's very important that we presented this initiative for the first time in the same EuroClimate Forum at COP25 in Madrid. So the first presentation of this initiative was born at EuroClimate. Next slide, please. The initiative is now part of regional policies, including the regional environmental policies in the region, as well as regional climatic commitments when it comes in what we call a Follow 20 and 40, covering forestry and livestock. And there's been more awareness of these 5 forests throughout the world, including although the Amazon, the Congo, and Indonesia are better known, but we're trying to give more visibility to the 5 forests by bringing people such as Leonardo DiCaprio on board. This way, the world will know more about the 5 forests, and we need to keep raising awareness about these 5 forests. We have 5 main points of action. First, we need to counteract the main drivers of deforestation, namely illegal livestock raising. By working with the private sector, as mentioned, we can have this goal of zero deforestation in the supply chain, but by also closing illegal markets. Secondly, we need to improve governance both for state forestry management as well as with indigenous and local communities. Thirdly, we need to improve a lifestyle that is compatible with the forests, that can compete with and substitute livestock raising. We can find initiatives that are also culturally appropriate, that could replace the destructive nature of livestock raising. Seeing as many of the forests have been degraded by the forestry, there's a lot of potential for restoration, but restoration should be done in a way that could bring benefits to local communities throughout the region. And finally, science and monitoring, so that we can have evidence of our improvements in a rigorously scientific manner. If we can work as a multi-sectoral alliance covering all of these areas, by the year 2030 we could reach our goal of protecting 10 million hectares of forests. We can restore 500,000 hectares of forest. We can have zero species extinction and zero illegal livestock raising in the 5 forests. In this way, we can ensure human well-being by especially upholding the lifestyles of indigenous and local communities. Now, it's a very ambitious initiative, and the goals that the region is facing, especially in some countries and specific forests, are very complex and difficult. So many people ask, is this even possible? And I would like to give you a few examples of some steps forward we've taken over the past few months. In Panama, we have taken huge leaps in the recognition of indigenous rights in protected areas. And in fact, here at the COP, we have given visibility to the indigenous issue in Panama. Here's an example right outside the COP. In Costa Rica has been in the spotlight. They've received an important international prize, the Earthshot Prize, for managing to double the forests in its territory over the past 30 years. And now they are focusing more on marine conservation. So I'd like to congratulate the country of Costa Rica. In Nicaragua, they've also been creating new protected areas, and even more are being planned. Honduras has been facing grave threats to the Mesquitia forest, and they've taken important decisions. The government has taken difficult decisions, in fact, to fight against organized crime within the Mesquitia forest. In Belize, in order to keep the connectivity between the north and southern part of the Maya forest, they have been creating what is known as the Maya Forest Corridor. It's the last link to create a single forest and prevent it from splitting into two. And finally, I'd like to stress the efforts of Guatemala. Over the past 10 years, we've had a multi-sectoral alliance to bring back governance and to conserve and restore a very large area of the Maya Biosphere Reserve, especially when it comes to indigenous communities living there. Here's an example from 2009. where the Maya Reserve was being threatened by narco livestock raising. In fact, the forest was disappearing at an incredibly fast pace, but it was also affecting the social fabric. In fact, many of the social concessions, which were a model for the world, were being suspended and cancelled due to the infiltration of organized crime. Through multi-sectoral efforts, we were able to move forward very quickly. Many new checkpoints were set out throughout the reserve in strategic areas. There was more policing and monitoring within the reserve. And when it comes to climate justice, many individuals were actually taken to court. Many people linked to organized crime and livestock raising. Through these and other efforts, we managed to take back 150,000 hectares of forest directly from the hands of organized crime, areas that have been devastated. The good news is that areas that in 2009 looked like this, now in 2021, have been fully recovered through natural regeneration of protected areas. This is the very same area you just saw today. Wildlife is also coming back. And even more importantly, the social fabric of local communities is also bouncing back with economic activities that are more sustainable in this area, including more active forest reforestation. And only a month ago, the government, through its CONAP ministry, was able to say that it was given new concessions for new local communities and the extension of many existing community concessions. And for the first time in history, in the Maya Biosphere Reserve, the forest is growing instead of shrinking. This is the first time in history. So I think this is an example, and it's very clear, that if we work in a multi-sectoral approach and we have a tight cooperation between civil society, government, and donors, we are able to take back and conserve the 5 forests for the benefits of the climate, wildlife, and biodiversity, as well as the well-being of human beings. So thank you very much.
Vamos a pasar ahora a un...
Now we will have a panel discussion moderated by Dr. Chris Jordan from Rewild.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon, everyone. We now have a very distinguished guest representing the Mesoamerica region. I will now introduce you all. We have Mr. Levi Sucre, who's the coordinator of the Mesoamerican Alliance of Peoples and Forests, as well as the Brewery Indigenous People of Costa Rica. Welcome. Next to him, we have Vice Minister Javier Gutierrez, who's Vice Minister for the Environment and Natural Resources and Presidential Secretary for Climate Change in Nicaragua. Then we have Francisco Calavid, Forestry Director for Panama. Then we have Vice Minister Francisco Escalante, who's Vice Minister for the Institute for Forestry Conservation in Honduras. Then we have Vice Minister Freddy Chiroy, Vice Minister for Natural Resources and Climate Change in Guatemala, and representing the pro-temporary presidency of the CCAD. And then we have Director Patricia Campos, who's the Director for Climate Change of the Ministry of the Environment and Energy in Costa Rica. In the audience, we also have a few other ministers supporting this initiative, so I'd like to welcome you as well. The Ministers of Agriculture and Livestock of Guatemala and Panama, Jose Angel Lopez and Augusto Valderrama, who are also here with us. Welcome. Now, the panelists, you will have to take off your mask when you speak so that the interpreters can see your face. And we will be cleaning, disinfecting the microphone between speakers in order to comply with the health restrictions. We will be giving you 3 to 5 minutes to speak about your respective countries and your participation in this initiative. In the back, we have Alexa again, who will hold up a yellow card when you only have a couple of minutes, and a red card when you have used up your 5 minutes. We'd like to apologize for not giving you more time, but in order to have a representation of the entire region in this event, we have asked a number of panelists to join. So, in order to begin, I think I'll ask you the first question to everyone. What are the main challenges and opportunities for this initiative in your respective countries? And we will begin with Levi. If you could please hand me the microphone. Levi, please go ahead. Very well, you can hear me. My name is Levi Sucre. I'm a brewery indigenous man from Costa Rica, and I coordinate the Mesoamerican Alliance of People and Forests. For over 10 years, we have brought together different territorial governments from Panama to Mexico, people who take decisions daily on the ground. And we've also brought on board regional units that work within the framework of the alliance, such as the coordinator for women's issues from Panama all the way to Mexico. We have our coordinator, Sarah Gomi. If you could please raise your hand. She covers the Mesoamerica region. We also have a youth network that has been up and running for about 3 years. And we have also set up the Mesoamerican Leadership Academy, which has been running for the past 4 years in Central America and Mexico, where communities can share best practices, and it's aimed towards women and young people in the region. And tomorrow we'll be launching the Mesoamerican Territorial Fund, which is based on the principles of territorial financing, which we set up as a global alliance between the Mesoamerican Alliance of People and Forests, the PIP in Brazil, COICA in the Amazon Basin, Repelink in Africa, and AMAN in Asia. So it's a global community alliance. And we have set up this Shanta mechanism, which sets up preconditions for territorial investments. And this is what we based our Mesoamerican Territorial Fund on. And this will give us the viability and the experience of working directly with the communities that we'd like to have this alliance effect. What we're also bringing to the table with the people and communities around the main 5 forests is the integrated vision of indigenous peoples when it comes to the conservation of forests. As we were saying, this initiative has made the Mesoamerican region change from governments and all decision makers down to an indigenous principle, which is to understand that forests can only be preserved if people participate, if people are actively taking part, if the community is on board, if there's a dialogue with the government and with decision makers. That is the only way in which we'll be able to save our jobs and lives. So I think that this is a great initiative of what we've been doing as cooperation between indigenous peoples and governments. So we're facing a new challenge together, and we hope to overcome it together, not only for the good of our peoples and our region, but for the well-being of humanity, because the 5 main forests of Mesoamerica also affect climate change throughout the world. So we are ready and willing to bring our knowledge, our experience, and our community work in order to make a success out of this initiative. Thank you. Thank you, Levi. Now we'll give the microphone to Nicaragua, Vice Minister Javier Gutierrez, who also has many experiences to share with indigenous peoples. Yes, thank you. I think the important point to bring up is that indigenous and Afro-descendant communities have shown us and continue to teach us that the best way to overcome climate change is, and also to uphold their socioeconomic way of life, is to preserve forests. Now, we've given many names such as best practices, etc., but in the end, it's what indigenous peoples have been doing for generations, preserving forests. And I think that if the forests we have now in Nicaragua, if they exist today, it is thanks to the indigenous population. Despite all of the problems, pressures, and threats that we face from every point of view across the board, deforestation is a very complex issue. The forests we do have today are there thanks to the historic work that indigenous populations have carried out. And so I think one of the main challenges we have actually is to acknowledge this from a legal point of view, from an institutional point of view, and that's why Nicaragua since the 1980s has granted autonomy to the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua. Indigenous people in the Caribbean coast have regional autonomy. They have 3 levels of government. They have a regional indigenous council, indigenous government, and this has led to a great development, but they've also faced many challenges. And so I think that this initiative is now aligning itself with the challenges of these indigenous populations. All 23 indigenous territories have official titles. They have full community use of their respective areas. So at least this is one of the pluses that Nicaragua can bring to this initiative within this context. And finally, just wanted to finish up by saying that the 5 Forest Initiative is reviving the spirit of the region by creating a biological corridor and the Mesoamerican corridor, and by looking at our experiences, we should think and share with the world how this is an area of world interest at the highest level, since at least in Nicaragua, more than 1 million people depend on these forests. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Viceministro. Solo voy a...
Thank you much indeed, Vice Minister.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you much indeed, Vice Minister. Very important experience there as far as indigenous autonomy is concerned in Nicaragua. It's a good time now to be able to do that, to explain what we're all doing in the different countries. I think by doing this we can help to mitigate the main threats. Another country that's been working on these sorts of issues is Panama. I'll give the floor now to the Forest Director from Panama. Thank you much indeed. Thank you to EUROCLIMA for allowing us to be here. Also to CCAD, our colleagues, ministers, deputy ministers, indigenous representatives. For us, this is a hugely important initiative. We're here at when we're at COP25 in Spain, it was very much relevant. But now I think it's just a key part of our economies. We're looking at the pandemic, the post-pandemic era. We're looking at greater opportunities, not just in our countries, but for all indigenous peoples. Getting indigenous peoples involved is key. And we, as government, as Panama, we've tried to empower our indigenous peoples there. And this is what we've said. Indigenous peoples can actually teach us what to do. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We already have the wheel. And for those reasons, we already have the techniques, the things we need to do here in Central America. Today, through this initiative, we've heard about Morazan's dream, i.e. that Morazan be one area, one united area. And we've done this in Panama. This is what we've been working for with our agro-pecuarian minister. We have him here to allow us to look at both environment but also agriculture, cattle ranching, to understand that these are some activities that cannot carry on. You can't just say to people, you can't do this. You have to show people what they can do. You have to show what is sustainable. And we, Panamanian government, we are trying to empower indigenous people to do that. We have various laws, we have bills, we have ministerial decrees that guarantee rights can be enjoyed by the indigenous peoples. So there's coordination between the indigenous peoples and the government, what we're doing at the governmental level, making sure that there are specific changes as far as forestry is concerned, looking for more monitoring, looking at more geolocalization. It's important for us to know where exactly our forests are being lost. We need to make sure there's interconnectivity with other countries in Central America. That's going to be key. Biodiversity is key as well. It's important to know that in some areas of Central America, what's going to happen if they get cut off? What's going to happen with jaguars if they can't move from one area to area? And therefore we need to continue to support this sort of initiative. That's key for us. We do this through our colleagues, our CCAD, through all the different ministries in our country, and through all the different organized indigenous peoples in Panama, for example. The idea we have in Panama, a very key idea, is that indigenous people should be allowed to enjoy their lands. That's why the forestry, agriculture ministries are here to support this initiative, to support our forests in Panama, but basically to support all of the forests in Central America. Thank you.
Gracias, director.
Thank you very much indeed, Director. Indeed, Mesoamerica is a leader in this area when it comes to indigenous peoples. And I don't think that necessarily gets the attention it should from political levels. So maybe this sort of initiative and the cooperation between CCAD and the AMPB will help to push forward this sort of cooperation more in the future, push that forward at the global level. Let's move on to the Vice Minister Frescoalante from the Honduras Forestry Institute. This is another country with one of the 5 great forests. Indigenous peoples are very much involved in what they're doing there. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Hello to everybody listening to us online. Thank you to EUROCLIMA. Thank you to the CCAD. It's great to be here on this panel, sharing it with colleagues, with authorities from the region there in Mesoamerica. I think basically climate change as a problem, you know, it has no borders. The phenomena we see there are local impacts, but also global impacts. And therefore the best we can do as leaders of our countries is to unite our forces and make sure, you know, we're talking about 0 loss of species. It's a huge target, but it is our responsibility. It's a mandate from God, if you will, to look after where we live. So lots of challenges, but at the same time we need political will, technical skills, and technically I think we understand that there's no way back. The way that we produced to date, that can't carry on. Transporting everything around the world, that's not the way forward. What we've been doing in Honduras then to try and have an impact. I was there in Madrid in COP25 where this was just an idea. Now we have our impact indicators in Honduras. In 2008, our president then, Mr. Hernandez, he commissioned the SOS Mosquitia initiative. because he saw that the agricultural frontier was moving into the forests and saw that land was being taken over. There was lots of narco trafficking. They were taking up land, and the president then commissioned a task force against environmental crime. And that was a way of uniting all the different institutions, civil society, the Justice Department, also brought in the army and the technical bodies that could help to be able to stop, to be able to monitor, and just to raise the alarm as to what we're losing. 23,000 hectares are being lost every year, and most of that is there in the Honduran Mosquitia. So progress is being made. We understand the ancestral rights that indigenous peoples have, and these indigenous areas have been handed over to local councils, indigenous councils. This really was the be-all and end-all. The Honduran indigenous peoples now can enjoy the rights as the owners of their land. So we've done everything we can. We've surveyed forestry. We've done everything on their behalf. And what are we doing in Honduras to strengthen forestry management? I think that's important here to express here at this panel in EUROCLIMA. We're the first country there in the region to have a voluntary association agreement with the EU, so that any product or any sub-product that's being marketed either in Honduras or regionally or internationally has a guarantee that it has been produced in line with the rights of local indigenous communities in Honduras, and that it has fulfilled, it's met the requirements of environmental sustainability. So that's what we're doing. We're working together. We're going to be talking about a new label. We're going to be looking at workers' rights. We're going to look at the various different sectors, forestry, livestock farming. So we're all working towards one aim. We're working on this with the EU. We've actually ratified this bill this week, I think, in Honduras. It's going to be published in the official bulletin this week. And that's going to be done from both sides, from the Honduran side, the EU side. I would like more time, but I'll just close by saying there are a lot of expectations. But I think there's a huge chance. We've been said to be one of the most vulnerable countries in the world vis-à-vis climate change. But we need leadership, and I don't think there's much time left to act. And that's why we're starting with protecting our own resources with the support of the EU. And I think we can make a difference. Lots of expectations about circular economy, for example, and as far as restoring lands, forestry, coming up with a more circular economy in general. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Viceministro.
Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Minister. Let's move on now to two countries, Guatemala and then Costa Rica, with important examples as to their processes dealing with the threats of deforestation. So, Frederic Chiroy, the Vice Minister from Guatemala. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you. I'd like to say hello on behalf of our pro-tempore Environment Minister. We are a multicultural, multilingual country. We have significant biodiversity stocks. We are considered to be one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. And we have, well, around 33% of our country is protected areas. And the government there has prioritized the protection of our forests and our natural resources. As you know, we're seen as a very vulnerable country to climate change, despite the fact that we only produce 0.007% of world greenhouse gases. So Guatemala and the SICA initiative, we're looking at ways of protecting forests through different strategies, looking at recovering ecosystems. We're also looking at solutions based on nature, and that's why recently, as we heard in the presentation, the government of Guatemala, through our president and our ministers, they granted new concessions for restoration of forests and enlarged those that were already there. And I think this is a model for the rest of the world as to how you can have specific objectives when we're trying to recover deforested areas and protecting other areas, for example, Selva Maya. Of course, there are huge challenges, but this is just one of the steps that we're taking to try and protect the resources we have, trying to protect them and recover the environment we still have. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Deputy Minister. Now we go to Patria Campos, Director from Costa Rica. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to EUROCLIMA for allowing us to have this event. The good thing about being last is I can sort of summarize what I've heard, and I think what we have to do is, as a region, we have to recognize that the forests are a natural resource and that will allow us as a region to work together to protect them. We have to recognize what forests give us. This is a very important measure, I think. It's a very important way of capturing carbon, but it's also an important way of protecting water resources, fauna, and it's also important for us to protect our soils. And it allows us to adapt and be resilient. So we have to recognize that. And we do have to thank EUROCLIMA for these sorts of events, these various different events that allow us to raise our voices for this cause, which is not just the causes of the governments, but also the public, the private sector, the academic sector. And it's in cooperation with local and indigenous populations that we're making progress. So everybody has to come together. All sectors in all of these countries represented here have to come together to come up with policies to be able to manage our forests for their good. What I've heard today is the necessity to have political will to be able to protect forests and biodiversity. And we need to have openness to be able to have an economic inclusive progress to make sure that we are looking at a more sustainable transition. But we have to do things now, and I think here we're all in the same line. We have to work together, united, and only by doing that we can strengthen our resources. The challenge in and of itself, and I'm talking about my country and others, well, in Costa Rica, we started in the 1980s with our programs, and we were able to stop deforestation. We're back up to around 60–70% as far as forest coverage is concerned in Costa Rica. But we've done that with we have our director here, We've had a huge amount of support. So we've developed this model, and we've shown that you can actually create profits, create money from sustainable, environmentally friendly economic policies. So there can be success. Obviously, it's a long road. There's still a long way to go to make sure that we all get to the same target, i.e. carbon neutrality by 2050. But not just carbon neutrality. We need resilience, adaptation, and we need to make sure that we are all on the same line. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much indeed, Ms. Campos. Before we go to the conclusions, I have a question, very quick question to Levi, maybe to others as well if we have time. Given your experience with other regional initiatives, the Morazan idea, the Mesoamerican corridor, what are the most important conclusions you've learned to make sure that regional cooperation can work, to make sure that cooperation can work in the long term? Obviously including everybody, the indigenous movement, indigenous peoples as well. This is the $64,000 question, isn't it? What we've learned. Well, the Mesoamerican Corridor Initiative, well, in that, we developed a huge amount when it came to dialogue, communication, working together. And I think that's the basic key to any initiative. Indigenous populations, ever more, increasingly, we are putting our ideas forward, and governments are actually starting to listen to us and allow us to participate. I think that's how you can be a success. That's how you make everything a success.
Thank you, Levi. I don't know if anyone else would like to chime in. Well, I think that all of our countries and our peoples need to acknowledgement that the environment isn't political. It belongs to everyone. And by acknowledging this, we need the will of all the governments. We need to make sure that this initiative becomes a reality. We need to go over and above administrations and governments. At the end of the day, we are Panama, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, but we're also a region. And as a region, we need to look at this together to make sure that this initiative becomes a reality. And we need to go above the political level. We need to have policies that will last much longer than our administrations. I'll be very brief. I think there's a very strong initiative here. Action for climate brings people together, and there's a focus on reducing poverty. So we need to see how we can deal with people in the most simple way. When we work with indigenous peoples, for example, they've been very used to managing their resources, the water, the other natural resources. They are very used to chasing and fishing. But we need to make sure that they're involved in the process. I'm the youngest minister in the region, and I see that there are children who have certain talents and who are aware of the problems that they're facing. What we hear every day is that there's no time. We can change lives. We are able to see that on a daily basis. We can see it in the forest regions, and we've spoken about this, and we agree about it. We can have a technical school across the region. There's agriculture in Honduras. There's a wonderful forestry school which is which deals with facing up to pests, and this is a school which is very important. And we should be able to link up these different schools through platforms, and that way we'll be able to make sure that future generations and future leaders will be able to emerge. So what you said about schools, I think, is incredibly important. There are also schools which can use specialists, for example. We need experts, and they can provide solutions for the communities. Sometimes you don't have to read a whole lot. You have certain experts in communities, and the people on the front line are able to see what's happening through climate change.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. Well, I think there are three main lessons that we've learned, which will allow us to bolster our action. We need to seek out synergies and complementarities through climate and biodiversity. And that will make us more effective and efficient with the resources that we have. We're going to be able to benefit as much as possible from our natural resources. The second lesson that we've learned is that we need more empowerment of the participants, the main players, the citizens. We need to make sure that they have better skills. The more educated and the more informed they are, and the more empowered that they are, and the more included and involved they feel, then the more they'll be able to contribute into the future and face up to this challenge. So this is the second lesson learned. It's incredibly important. The third one is the need to have data. These data need to be accessible to the future, to the public rather. We need to be able to interpret these data and use them on a daily basis. And we also need to feel part of the solution. So I think these are the three main lessons that I've learned, the three main ones anyway. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to our panelists. On the whole, Mesoamerica has a number of problems. The first one is that it's not very visible for donors, for example, or in the media. People aren't aware of the importance for fighting climate change. However, there are models which are providing results to mitigate and adapt against climate change. Through this initiative and this collaboration, then I think we have a great opportunity to increase the visibility of the region and to communicate around the region about what's happening, to communicate around the world about what's happening in the region. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the support of the European Union for making this possible. And now we're going to give the floor to Yair Oriola Quiros, the Executive Director of CCAD, for some final comments and a regional perspective. And then we'll have a final presentation from Jeremy Radachowski. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the vice ministers, directors, all the different entities working with us in the SICA region. We'd like to thank President Lopez, Minister Valderrama, the Minister of Agriculture of Panama. These are members of our fisheries sector. Ms. Lucrecia Rodriguez, who's also with us. So this is a regional job. It's multi-sectoral. There's the 5 forest initiative, but there are some others. The European Union has also been involved, MPB. There are many other players who have been working alongside us. We're going to be able to move forward in the region, and we're going to be able to bolster the region and create a Mesoamerican corridor which will bring us together. It's just one forest, even though there are different names given to the forests. But at the end, it's just one Mesoamerican region. The Colombian region told me that it goes all the way to Colombia from Mexico. So it's Sica plus Mexico plus Colombia. So we have a great opportunity here on a regional basis. We're going to be able to work together, and we'll also work among sectors. Illegal cattle ranching is what's affecting the forests. So we need a commitment from the institutes in Central America. So we're going to work together and be able to move forward. And we'll move forward with this initiative among others. I would like to thank the European Union, EUROCLIMA+, for giving us this opportunity to be able to talk here in this pavilion. So we're able to have virtual participants from the CCAD. We've been working with our strategic partners, and I'm sure that it'll be very beneficial for the entire region. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. So I would just like to thank the European Union from the bottom of my heart, and EuroClima+, to all the ministers, vice ministers, directors, participants, for all the representatives of forests and indigenous peoples. Thank you very much for all the work that you're carrying out on a daily basis to preserve forests. Once again, if we work together, and we work in a very active and multi-sectoral way, then we can preserve the 5 forests. Not only the 5 forests, but we can also create an international model, an example on how to protect biodiversity and how to also benefit the environment and the people. Thank you very much to everyone. I don't have anything else to say. Thank you very much.